The moment I heard my 16-year-old daughter's scream echo through the school's concrete basement, I knew something was horribly wrong. The dim emergency lights flickered against the cold walls as she stumbled backward, tears streaking down her cheeks, staring into the darkness where HOA Karen stepped forward, dressed head to toe in a black shirt, black pants, and black shoes, her silhouette twisted and monstrous. Karen's hand shook as she raised the handgun, her voice a chilling whisper cutting through the still air. "Your mother should have listened," my daughter begged, trembling, her breath sharp and broken, but Karen only tightened her finger around the trigger. A metallic click echoed, followed by sirens in the distance, growing louder, racing toward us. I ran down the hallway, my heart shredding with every step, but before I could reach the basement door, a single deafening gunshot tore through the darkness. Before this story truly begins, I want to ask every single one of you watching, which city are you watching from right now? Go ahead and drop your city's name in the comments. I love seeing where my viewers are tuning in from across the USA. And before we dive deeper into what happened that terrifying day, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, because stories like this, they're not just stories. They're warnings every parent needs to hear. Now, as you just saw in the opening, my 16-year-old daughter was attacked inside her own school's basement, an attack no child should ever face, especially at a place meant to protect them. That morning had started like any other. She grabbed her books, double-checked her project supplies, kissed me on the cheek, and rushed out the door with that bright innocence only teenagers still carry. But even then, for weeks, I had noticed something strange. HOA Karen lurking around the neighborhood in her all-black outfit, pacing back and forth, staring at our house with a look that sent chills straight down my spine. She had even shown up near the school twice, dressed the same way, whispering to herself as if planning something. I brushed it off as her usual craziness, never imagining she'd follow my child into the school basement. But when the school called, panic in their voice, my heart dropped. The corridors were buzzing, teachers shouting, alarms ringing. And all I could think was, where is my daughter? Is she safe? As I pushed through the chaos and rushed toward the basement door, I had no idea that Karen was already waiting inside, holding a handgun, dressed in black, and ready to destroy everything I loved. The day my 16-year-old daughter walked into the school basement, she had no idea she was stepping straight into the jaws of a nightmare that had been quietly stalking her for weeks. She only went down there because her history teacher asked her to bring up an old box of projectors for a presentation, something simple, routine, and harmless, or so it should have been. The basement was colder than usual, the concrete walls swallowing every sound, and the flickering fluorescent lights cast long, trembling shadows that stretched across the narrow hallway like ghostly fingers reaching for her ankles. She hugged her binder to her chest as she descended the last step, telling herself it was just a basement, just a quick task, just a school errand, but the feeling in her stomach tightened with every echo of her own footsteps, each one bouncing back at her louder and more distorted than the last. She paused halfway, hearing something, a faint scrape, like someone dragging their shoe slowly across the floor. She whispered, "Hello? Anyone there?" but the basement swallowed her voice whole. Then, from behind the last row of metal storage shelves, a silhouette shifted. A figure stepped forward, slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly calm. And the moment the dim light hit her face, my daughter's breath froze in her lungs, because there stood HOA Karen, fully dressed in her usual sinister all-black outfit, black shirt, black pants, black shoes, even a black jacket pulled tightly around her shoulders. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it sharpened her scowl, and her eyes burned with a twisted rage that didn't belong in a school, didn't belong near any child. My daughter stuttered, "What are you doing here? This is a school," but Karen cut her off with a cruel smile that spread too slowly, as if savoring the fear growing in my daughter's eyes. Without speaking, she reached behind her and slammed the basement door shut, the heavy metal clang echoing so violently the whole room shook. My daughter jumped, her heart pounding, and instinctively stepped back toward the stairs, but Karen blocked her path with a single step forward, her boots scraping sharply across the concrete. "Your mother thinks she can ignore me," Karen hissed, her voice dripping with venom. She thinks she can vote against me, embarrass me, challenge me in front of the HOA. But she forgot one thing. Karen leaned closer, her breath cold and sour as it brushed against my daughter's cheek. Everything she loves can disappear too. And before my daughter could even react, Karen slipped her hand inside her black jacket and pulled out a handgun, black, metallic, and deadly, the barrel catching the flickering light with a cold shimmer. My daughter gasped, stumbling backward, her knees trembling so hard she nearly fell. "Please, please don't," she cried, her hands raised instinctively, her voice cracking under the weight of terror no child should ever face. Karen tilted her head with a chilling calmness, the gun steady in her hand despite the madness blazing in her eyes. "Do you know how many times I tried to warn your mother?" she whispered, stepping closer. "Do you know how many times she ignored me?" My daughter shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "My mom didn't do anything, please, I don't even know what you're talking about." But Karen only pressed the gun forward until the barrel aimed directly at the center of my daughter's forehead. My daughter turned, sprinting toward the far corner of the basement, but Karen grabbed her backpack strap and yanked her backward so hard she hit the floor with a painful thud. She tried crawling away, her palms scraping against the rough concrete, but Karen stomped her hand down with her boot, pinning her in place. "Stop fighting," Karen snarled. "It'll be over faster." Upstairs, at that very moment, I was answering what should have been an ordinary phone call from the school secretary, yet the tremble in her voice instantly told me something was wrong. "Ma'am, you need to come to the school immediately," she stammered. "There's been an incident in the basement." My chest tightened, my breathing stopped, and the world around me blurred as I rushed out of my house, keys shaking in my hands. Back in the basement, my daughter screamed for help, her voice raw and desperate, but the thick concrete walls drowned her cries. Karen lifted the gun again, the barrel inches from my daughter's trembling face. Tears dripped off her chin, her breath shallow and fast, her entire body shaking. "Please," she begged in a whisper. "I just want to go home." Karen smiled, cold, satisfied, deranged, and placed her finger firmly on the trigger. And just as my daughter squeezed her eyes shut, bracing herself for the worst, a single, deafening gunshot exploded through the basement, tearing the air apart. When the gunshot blasted through the school basement, everything inside me froze, the world around me fell into a terrifying quiet as if time itself refused to move until I knew whether my 16-year-old daughter was alive or gone forever. I sprinted through the school's main doors, pushing past teachers, students, and security guards shouting into walkie-talkies, my chest burning, my heart pounding so violently I could hear it in my ears. The hallway leading to the basement was flooded with flashing red lights from the fire alarm system triggered by someone in panic, and the smell of cold metal and dust filled the air. When I reached the basement entrance, 2 teachers were desperately trying to open the heavy door, their hands shaking. "She's in there, your daughter's in there," one of them cried, and I felt the floor tilt beneath me. The instant the door finally swung open, paramedics rushed past me, their equipment rattling, their voices sharp and tense. I stumbled down the stairs, gripping the rail to keep myself upright, and the sight that greeted me hit me harder than any impact I'd ever felt, my daughter lying on the cold concrete, her hands trembling, her cheek streaked with tears and dust, a bleeding wound on her arm where the bullet had grazed her when Karen fired. She was alive, but barely conscious, blinking up at the paramedics as they gently lifted her onto a stretcher. I fell to my knees beside her, grabbing her hand as she whispered, "Mom, she tried to kill me." Karen tried to, but the paramedics urged me to step back as they secured her oxygen mask and carried her toward the waiting ambulance outside. The night air was filled with flashing red and blue emergency lights bouncing off the walls of the school building, and I barely had time to breathe before I heard screaming behind me, HOA Karen, still dressed in her same all-black outfit, being dragged out from behind the basement shelves by 2 officers. Her black shirt was covered with dust, her black pants wrinkled, her hair disheveled, and she looked more like a wild animal cornered than a human being. "She attacked me!" Karen shrieked at the top of her lungs, her voice cracking with fake desperation. She grabbed the gun, she tried to shoot me. I was defending myself. The officers exchanged confused and disgusted looks while Karen thrashed violently, trying to twist the story even as students and teachers looked on in horror. "You're lying," one teacher shouted. "We heard the scream, we heard you shouting." But Karen only screamed louder, her voice echoing across the parking lot. "She's lying. They're all lying. I didn't do anything. Her mother provoked me." It was surreal, almost like watching someone act out a scene from a twisted movie, but this was no performance, this was the woman who had tried to kill my child. As the adrenaline surged through me, I rushed toward the officers. "She pointed a gun at my daughter." I shouted, barely able to speak through my tears. "I want her arrested, I want her charged, she tried to murder my child." Before the police could respond, several HOA members arrived, out of breath and drenched in panic. Mrs. Sanders, who normally acted like HOA royalty, collapsed against the hood of her SUV, sobbing uncontrollably. Mr. Ross ran his hands over his head, shaking. "Karen, what did you do? What did you do?" he shouted, but Karen's response was a string of incoherent screams and accusations, every word making less sense than the last, her voice breaking as she realized nobody was believing her lies. As the police finally forced her into the back of a patrol car, she slammed her palms against the windows, leaving smeared marks as she yelled threats at the officers. But even in her madness, something about her black outfit nagged at me. It was too intentional, too deliberate, like a uniform she wore whenever she planned something dark. While I stood trembling, trying to steady my breathing, the school principal approached me with a pale face and shaking hands. "We found something you need to see," he whispered, guiding me inside the building. He led me to the security office, where 2 guards rewound the CCTV footage. And as the screen flickered to life, my heart nearly stopped. There was Karen, entering the school at 7:09 a.m., long before students arrived, wearing her same all-black outfit, holding something tight under her jacket. She didn't glance around. She didn't hesitate. She moved with purpose. Determination. Almost like she had rehearsed her steps. The footage switched angles, now she was seen slipping into the basement, pacing, checking her gun, muttering words the camera couldn't capture. My stomach turned. She had planned this. She had been waiting for my daughter. But then the guard paused the clip and pointed at something I had missed. Karen wasn't alone. For a split second, barely half a second, a shadowy figure appeared behind her in the hallway, too far for the camera to identify, but close enough to suggest she wasn't working alone. The guard swallowed hard. Whoever that is, they knew Karen was here. They were helping her. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just an HOA feud. This wasn't just a crazy neighbor losing control. There was a hidden motive, something deeper, something darker, something Karen hadn't screamed about yet. And as I stared at the blurry figure on the CCTV screen, a cold realization washed over me: the real nightmare wasn't over. It was only beginning. By the next morning, the entire town felt like it was vibrating with anger, fear, and disbelief as news of the attack spread like wildfire, turning our once quiet community into a storm of outrage. Parents swarmed the school parking lot before sunrise, shouting at administrators, demanding answers, some crying uncontrollably while others held their children tightly as if they were afraid someone else might snatch them into harm's way. Social media exploded, local Facebook groups, neighborhood apps, even Twitter threads filled with screenshots of police cars, ambulance lights, and shaky cell phone videos of Karen being dragged out of the school basement wearing her all-black outfit, screaming lies and threats. And the sickening truth about what happened started gaining national attention. Students who witnessed bits and pieces of the chaos started posting their own accounts online, some trembling on camera as they described how they'd seen HOA Karen lurking around the basement door days before the attack, always in that same black shirt and black pants, pacing like a restless predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One girl shared a video of Karen standing behind the gym storage room just last week, still in black, staring at the exit doors with a blank expression that sent chills through everyone watching. Another student came forward saying he saw Karen following my daughter down the hallway 2 weeks ago, walking so quietly and so close behind her that he thought they were related, until he heard Karen muttering something under her breath about lessons that must be learned. The school tried to control the growing panic, but every attempt to settle the community failed as more horrifying details leaked. At the hospital, reporters gathered outside the emergency entrance, trying to get a glimpse of my daughter or an official statement. And despite her pain, despite the trauma and the stitches along her arm, my brave 16-year-old insisted on speaking, not for attention but because she refused to let Karen twist the narrative any further. With trembling hands and a voice still shaky from the attack, she said, she told me my mom needed punishment. She said hurting me would make her listen. She was waiting for me, she tracked me. Her quiet words broke something inside every parent watching, igniting a fury no administrator or police officer could calm. The HOA community gathered that same evening for an emergency meeting, one that erupted the moment Karen's name was mentioned. People shouted over each other, demanding immediate suspension of Karen's rights, removal from the neighborhood, and every possible legal action short of exile. Even Karen's own close neighbors admitted they had long been uncomfortable with her behavior. One elderly woman stood up, her voice shaking as she said, "I saw her burning papers in her front yard last month, all while wearing black. When I asked what she was doing, she screamed for me to mind my business." Another neighbor recounted how Karen once chased a teenage boy for skateboarding past her driveway. Someone else said Karen threatened to slash the tires of a delivery driver for parking slightly over the line. Her history of aggression, once brushed aside as drama or attitude, was now resurfacing with a terrifying clarity. Karen had always been dangerous, we just never took it seriously. And the worst part? In every story, every sighting, every past incident, she wore the same all-black outfit. Parents started calling it her attack uniform, a symbol of her rage and instability. Someone online even posted a collage titled, "The Black Outfit Pattern," showing screenshots of Karen from various HOA events, school hallways, neighborhood sidewalks, each time wearing black, each time caught in a confrontational posture. As the evidence piled up, fear mutated into speculation. Why black? Why always black? Why had she targeted my daughter specifically? And what about the shadowy figure seen behind her on CCTV, who were they? Some believed it was a second HOA member, others whispered about a family member of Karen helping her execute the attack. A few students claimed they saw an unknown adult near the basement earlier that day, watching the school like they were scouting it out, but no one could confirm anything yet. Meanwhile, whispers filled the community like smoke, rumors Karen was part of some secret faction inside the HOA, rumors she'd been planning something bigger, rumors that my family wasn't the only target. Anxiety spread like floodwater, drowning reason, leaving only fear. But the breaking point came when the school released a written statement asking for patience and understanding, which enraged the entire parent community. Videos of furious mothers went viral, footage of them pounding on the principal's door, shouting through tears that their children would not step foot back in that school unless Karen's motive was exposed and everyone involved was arrested. The school district scheduled an emergency town hall, but even that backfired as parents flooded the gymnasium, shouting for resignations, demanding immediate security changes, and begging for answers none of the officials were prepared to give. Some of the angriest voices stood on folding chairs, yelling that Karen must have had inside help, because no ordinary civilian could enter the school basement unnoticed, armed, and hours before students arrived. "Someone let her in," one father shouted. "She didn't just walk through walls." And although the superintendent tried to calm the crowd, his shaking voice and sweaty forehead only made things worse. But perhaps the most chilling moment came not from the adults, but from a quiet, soft-spoken student who stepped forward, clutching her phone. She said, "I saw Karen last month, outside my window, at night, staring at me. She was wearing black then too." The entire room fell silent. Every parent held their child closer. Karen's black outfit, once a meaningless wardrobe choice, had transformed into a symbol of terror. Suspense tightened around the community like a noose as theories spun and fear deepened. And just when emotions reached their breaking point, an officer walked into the town hall, whispering something into the superintendent's ear. The superintendent's face paled instantly. His lips trembled. He stepped to the microphone with a voice that barely held steady, and said the words that made the entire gym fall silent. "We have discovered something new in the basement." The deeper the investigation went, the more the truth twisted into something far darker than any of us dared imagine, and by the time detectives began combing through every inch of the basement, the school felt less like a learning space and more like a crime scene waiting to reveal its darkest secrets. Police marked off the entire lower level with yellow tape, flashlights slicing through the pitch-black corners as officers discovered strange, unsettling items Karen had dragged down there, objects completely out of place in a school. A stack of printed photos of my daughter walking home, sitting in class, talking to friends, a notebook filled with erratic handwriting repeating phrases like, "She must learn," "Her mother will pay," and, "Black brings power," and worst of all, a small duffel bag that contained zip ties, duct tape, and a long piece of black fabric that looked disturbingly like it could have been used as a blindfold. The lead detective's jaw tightened the moment he saw these objects, carefully lifting each one with gloved fingers. "This wasn't a spontaneous attack," he muttered. "She planned this." But what sickened everyone even more were the fingerprint results. Every item, every shelf, every corner where Karen had stood was covered in her prints, smeared heavily, as if she'd paced and touched everything repeatedly during the hours she waited for my daughter. And yet, mixed among Karen's fingerprints was a second set, unidentified, unfamiliar, belonging to someone who had been just as present in that basement as Karen. When detectives confronted Karen with the evidence, she spiraled even deeper into incoherent babbling, her eyes darting, her voice cracking as she tried to claim the fingerprints belonged to the basement spirit, then to the janitor, then to the shadow that follows her. Each lie became more absurd, more desperate, proving just how mentally fractured she had become. But the detective wasn't fooled. In one of their interrogations, he leaned forward and said coldly, "Karen, every time you've been seen in a violent confrontation, every HOA meeting, every threat, every meltdown, you were wearing black. Why?" Karen went silent. Completely silent. Her pupils shrank. Her breathing stilled. And then, almost trance-like, she whispered, "Black gives me control. Black means no one can stop me. Black means the lesson begins." The detective exchanged a horrified glance with the officer beside him. They later documented this as Karen's black outfit ritual, a twisted symbolic pattern she followed whenever preparing for something harmful. Meanwhile, the school administration began acting strangely defensive, too defensive. Instead of cooperation, they hesitated, stalling police requests for certain hallway camera footage, claiming technical issues or missing files. The detective grew suspicious, and so did I. "Why is footage missing from the day before the attack?" he demanded during a closed-door meeting. The principal fumbled with his tie, sweating. We're still trying to retrieve it. The system glitched." But the detective wasn't buying it. "Systems don't conveniently glitch only when a child is stalked," he snapped. Rumors started swirling that someone inside the school may have known Karen was there. Someone may have let her in. Someone may have erased footage. And the thought of a second accomplice, someone trusted, someone with access, sent a cold tremor through my entire body. Back at the hospital, my daughter was slowly recovering, her arms stitched, her breath steadier, but her eyes still carried the terror of that basement. I sat beside her bed every moment I could, holding her hand, brushing her hair from her face, whispering that she was safe now, but she wasn't convinced. "Mom, what if she isn't alone?" she whispered one night, her voice fragile. "What if the person behind her, the shadow, what if they're still out there?" Hearing my child say that, seeing the fear return to her expression, shattered me. I squeezed her hand tightly and forced a smile I didn't feel. "Nothing's going to happen to you again. I promise." But deep inside, I didn't know if I was telling the truth. Later that evening, the detective visited us with a grim expression. He sat down gently, clearing his throat. "Your daughter is incredibly brave," he said. "And she remembered something we didn't catch on camera." My stomach clenched. "What?" He leaned forward. "She said that right before Karen pointed the gun, she looked over her shoulder and whispered, 'Now?' I felt the blood drain from my face. Now? As in, signaling someone? The detective nodded slowly. That matches the second set of fingerprints we found. Someone else was down there. Someone Karen trusted. A sickening silence filled the room, and my daughter's hand tightened around mine. The detective continued, "We also searched Karen's house. And we found more black clothing, dozens of sets. All identical. But that's not what shocked us." He paused, lowering his voice. "We found notes, letters, written by someone else. Someone encouraging her. Someone feeding her anger. Someone who knew exactly what she was going to do." The air around us felt heavy, suffocating. My daughter's monitor beeped faster. I swallowed hard. "Do you know who?" The detective hesitated, his jaw tightening, his eyes narrowing as though he were holding back a storm. "We're close," he said. "But there's one more thing we discovered." He placed a folder on the table beside her hospital bed. Inside was a printed still image from the CCTV footage, one that was enhanced to reveal more detail. My heart dropped as I looked at the blurry but unmistakable outline of a person standing behind Karen in the hallway that morning, watching her descend into the basement, never once trying to stop her. The detective exhaled deeply. "This person wasn't a stranger," he said quietly. "This person has keys to the school. And access to every camera." My daughter's breath hitched. My vision blurred. Someone inside the school, someone with authority, had helped Karen. And as the detective stood to leave, he said the words that sent a final chill down my spine, "We're about to uncover something much bigger than Karen, and when we do, everything in this town is going to change." The deeper detectives dug, the more the puzzle twisted into something so sinister that even the most seasoned officers struggled to process it, and Section 5 of this nightmare began with a discovery no one expected: a hidden HOA vote, uncovered by accident when investigators searched Karen's home and found a stack of HOA meeting minutes, documents she was never supposed to have, that detailed a secret vote taken 3 months prior regarding neighborhood order enforcement. At first glance, it looked like a harmless administrative proposal, but as officers read deeper, the language shifted from policy to obsession, marked with red underlines and handwritten notes in Karen's messy scrawl: "Eliminate disruptions, target those who challenge authority, and most chillingly, start with her daughter." But it wasn't Karen's handwriting alone. Several notes were written by someone else, in a calm, clean script that contrasted sharply with Karen's erratic markings. Someone inside the HOA had been feeding her ideas, manipulating her anger, pushing her deeper into paranoia until she became a weapon. When detectives confronted HOA members, panic washed across their faces like a wave. Some swore they knew nothing, others trembled, and a few exchanged glances that screamed guilt. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, my daughter suddenly remembered something she had blocked out during the trauma. While she lay recovering, still weak from pain medication, her breath caught in her throat as she whispered, "Mom, she wasn't supposed to shoot yet." I froze. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She swallowed hard. Right before she pulled the trigger, Karen looked behind her, like she was waiting. And then she whispered, "I can't wait anymore." The realization struck me like lightning: Karen had been following orders. She wasn't acting alone, she was acting against someone's timing. Someone had orchestrated every step. When detectives interrogated Karen again, she was no longer screaming or delusional. Instead, she sat eerily calm in her cell, still wearing remnants of her all-black outfit, her eyes hollow, her voice a monotone whisper as though her mind had detached from reality. When the detective asked, who was helping you? Karen didn't hesitate. She didn't claim insanity. She didn't deny anything. She simply said, I'm not the leader. I'm only the messenger. The detective's jaw tightened. Messenger for who? Karen's lips curled upward in a strange, cold smile. You already know. She leaned closer to the glass, her breath fogging it. He told me the black clothes would give me strength. He said black would make me brave enough to do what was necessary. The detective, confused, asked, Who told you that? Karen's eyes flicked up, pupils stretching like ink in water. The one who protects the rules. The one who hates your daughter's mother more than I do. I felt my stomach turn. My name had been highlighted repeatedly in the HOA documents. Someone had marked me as a threat, someone who disrupted order, someone who embarrassed leadership, someone they viewed as dangerous simply because I questioned their absurd HOA fines and fought their controlling behavior. And now that someone had turned Karen into a weapon and pointed her at my daughter. When detectives pressed Karen further, she refused to say the name aloud. Instead, she recited fragments of sentences that made chilling sense only when pieced together. He has keys, he walks the halls, he holds the votes, he said she must learn first. The detective froze. He has keys? That detail hit like a bullet, because only one person in the entire HOA had keys to both the school and the neighborhood facilities. Someone who was present at nearly every school event. Someone trusted. Someone invisible because nobody questioned his access. The HOA president. The very man who oversaw Karen's fines, community rules, and neighborhood disputes. The man whose signature appeared on the secret HOA vote paperwork. The man who frequently walked through the school halls as a volunteer supervisor, the man who lived 2 houses away from Karen and visited her almost daily, claiming he was checking on her mental health. And suddenly, every whisper, every manipulation, every missing camera file, and every mysterious second fingerprint began aligning into a horrifying truth. Karen had never been the mastermind, she had been the puppet. The detective showed Karen a photo of the HOA president. Her reaction confirmed everything. Her eyes widened, her shoulders stiffened, and she whispered, He promised me protection if I did this. He said your daughter had to be the example, so everyone would obey the rules again. My breath caught. Rules? Karen nodded slowly, her voice cracking. He told me you were destroying the community, that you were dangerous, that hurting your daughter would send a message. The word stabbed deeper than any wound. Someone had targeted my child because I refused to bow to their HOA power games. But Karen wasn't finished. She leaned closer and whispered, but he got scared when I fired too soon. That wasn't the plan. He wanted her taken, not killed. Not yet. I felt physically sick as the detective flipped through more pages found in Karen's home, papers predicting dates, tasks, and phrases like Phase 1, basement prep, and Stage 2, transfer. Transfer. They planned to move my daughter somewhere. And that second fingerprint? It matched someone who had been volunteering at the school for months. A maintenance supervisor hired through the HOA president's recommendation. But before detectives could question him, he disappeared. His house was empty. His car gone. His phone turned off. And every camera facing the street near his home had been wiped clean. That night, detectives returned to the school for one final search, and what they found made the entire investigation take a horrifying turn. Behind a removable wall panel in the basement, they discovered a small hidden room. Inside it were 2 chairs, ropes, bottles of water, a map of the neighborhood, and a printed photo of my daughter taped to the wall with the words Phase 2 written in bold marker above it. My legs gave out when the detective showed me. My daughter clung to my arm, trembling in horror. And just as the detective assured us they were close to catching the real mastermind, his phone buzzed. He looked down, his face draining of color. What is it? I asked, my voice cracking. He swallowed hard. The HOA president, is missing. The hunt for the HOA president spread through the entire county like a wildfire, police checkpoints on every exit road, helicopters scanning rooftops, officers knocking on doors in the dead of night. But it wasn't until 3 days later that everything finally snapped into place, bringing us to the moment that would define our lives forever. Early that morning, just as the sun began to rise, painting the sky with pale streaks of orange and blue, detectives received a tip from a gas station clerk who recognized the HOA president from the news. He said the man had come in looking frantic, dressed sloppily, and constantly checking over his shoulder. Within an hour, police cornered him behind an abandoned storage facility, hiding inside a rusted old car with a bag full of burner phones, cash, and a detailed folder outlining plans far beyond my daughter, other children, other families, anyone who challenged his sick obsession with control. When they pulled him out, he didn't fight, he simply smirked, muttering that the neighborhood will fall apart without discipline. That same afternoon, Karen, still in fragments of her all-black outfit, was dragged into the courtroom alongside him, her eyes empty, her shoulders hunched, but her mouth spewing twisted devotion toward the man who had manipulated her. The courtroom was packed, parents, students, teachers, reporters, and community members all gathered to witness justice unfold. I sat beside my 16-year-old daughter, holding her trembling hand as the prosecutor laid out every detail: the secret HOA vote, the staged manipulation, the basement trap, the missing footage, the second accomplice, the hidden room, the obsessive plans, the motive rooted in vengeance against me for refusing to bend to their HOA tyranny. Every word felt like a stone dropped into a deep well inside my chest, heavy and cold, but necessary. Then came the moment everyone waited for, the verdict. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom, guilty on all counts. Karen collapsed instantly, sobbing uncontrollably, while the HOA president didn't flinch, instead glaring at me with a chilling calmness that said he regretted nothing. But justice had spoken. Both were sentenced to decades in federal prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring they would never harm another child again. For the first time since this nightmare began, I exhaled fully, feeling a weight lift off my soul. After the verdict, the judge allowed me to speak. I walked to the podium, my legs trembling but my heart steady, and looked out at the sea of faces, parents clutching their children, teachers nodding encouragingly, cameras pointed toward me. I took a deep breath. No community should ever wait until a child is hurt to take danger seriously, I said, my voice breaking with emotion. No parent should have to imagine their child alone, terrified, in a basement with a gun pointed at their head. No school should ignore warning signs. And no HOA should hold enough power to make anyone believe they have the right to control our families. Tears rolled down my daughter's cheeks as I continued. My daughter survived by strength, by courage, and by a miracle. But survival isn't enough. We must rebuild this community into something safer. Something kinder. Something worthy of our children. The courtroom erupted into applause, not applause of celebration, but applause of unity, of healing, of promise. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The HOA board was dissolved by the court, and a new group of parents was elected to rebuild it with fairness instead of fear. The notorious fines, the abusive enforcement rules, the secret meetings, everything that gave the HOA president power, was systematically dismantled. New policies were put in place requiring transparency, accountability, and regular psychological evaluations for anyone seeking leadership positions. As for the school, they transformed the building from the ground up: new cameras, motion detectors, panic buttons, metal detectors at entrances, hired security officers, and a strict policy ensuring no one could enter without authorization. The basement, once a symbol of fear, was fully renovated, brightened, ventilated, repurposed into an open learning lab so no dark corners remained for evil to hide in. Teachers began hosting workshops about student safety and mental health, inviting parents to join conversations instead of shutting them out. And through all this rebuilding, my daughter slowly found her own path toward healing. She started therapy, where she learned to confront her trauma instead of reliving it. She attended self-defense classes, not because she wanted to fight, but because she wanted to feel in control of her own body again. She returned to school weeks later, walking slowly at first, her heart pounding at every echo of footsteps behind her, but with me at her side and the support of her community, she reclaimed the hallways that fear had stolen from her. She even participated in a school assembly, sharing her story with trembling words but fierce resilience, inspiring other students to speak up when something feels wrong, to trust their instincts, to choose courage over silence. And the community responded with overwhelming love. Neighbors visited with meals, classmates left letters, local businesses donated funds to help families affected by HOA abuse. Slowly, painfully, our lives began to mend. One quiet evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset, my daughter rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Mom, do you think we'll ever feel normal again?" I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. "Maybe not the old normal," I said softly. "But a new normal, stronger, safer, better, yes, I believe we will." She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I'm glad it's over." I kissed the top of her head, feeling her warmth, her heartbeat, her life, everything Karen and her accomplice tried to steal. "It is over," I whispered. "And we survived." As we sat together, a soft breeze rustling the trees around us, I realized that this final chapter wasn't just about justice, it was about reclaiming peace, healing what was broken, and rebuilding what was shattered. And although scars would remain, they no longer defined us. What defined us now was strength, love, and the unshakable truth that no matter how dark the basement, no matter how vicious the threat, the light of a mother fighting for her child will always win. If this story touched you, terrified you, or opened your eyes to the dangers families face, please take a moment to like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more real, emotional, twist-filled stories just like this. And to every parent watching, hold your children close, trust your instincts, and never ignore the small warning signs. Your attention could be the one thing that saves a life.